Hey guys, tonight we begin somewhere high, dry, and suspiciously devoid of signage. Welcome to the Andes. The air is thin, the cliffs are dramatic, and the only thing more confusing than the elevation is the eerie silence of the local infrastructure. There's no welcome sign, no echoing town crier, not even a whisper of papyrus or parchment. Just crisp wind, dramatic alpacas, and you trying to figure out how an entire civilization ran its business without so much as a post-it note. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint at the horizon. Nothing but rocky paths and mossy ledges. The sun's sharp, and your water bottle's been empty since the last mountain goat stared at you with judgment. You stumble into a small settlement, mud brick houses, thatched roofs, no one shouting directions. And yet, somehow, everything is astonishingly organized. Carts lined up, grain sacks sorted by size, and someone is definitely keeping track of who owes what to whom. But how? A boy jogs past you, carrying a bundle of string. Not just any bundle, it's a tangle of knotted cords, dyed in varying colors, and swaying rhythmically like a disco curtain from a low-tech future. He gives you a look that clearly says, out of the way, confused outsider, and keeps running. Welcome to the empire of the Inca. Roughly from the early 13th century until the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, the Inca built one of the largest and most centralized empires in the pre-modern world, without a written alphabet. Let me say that again. No scrolls. No clay tablets. No emoji hieroglyphs. And yet, they ran a sprawling domain with more precision than some modern tax offices. Yes, I'm looking at you, that one DMV. You stumble upon your first clue, a worn wooden peg in the ground, from which hangs what looks like a mop that's gone through a rainbow filter. A local points and says nothing. You realize it's a quipu. A quipu, sometimes spelled quipu, isn't just an art project gone rogue. It's a communication device, accounting system, and possibly even a narrative tool all in one. Think of it as a three-dimensional spreadsheet. But instead of cells and columns, you've got cotton or alpaca wool cords, knotted in strategic ways to store data. Each knot can signify a number, tens, hundreds, even decimals, and the placement on the main cord, or the primary string, changes the value. The colors? Not just for show. They may indicate categories: corn, soldiers, textiles, sacrifices, hopefully in that order. It's like someone looked at an abacus and thought, sure, but what if it was wearable? As you poke at the quipu, delicately, please, a woman waves you over. She holds up a basket of potatoes, dozens of them, sorted in piles. She points to another quipu hanging on her wall. With a few gestures, she indicates, the purple string means tubers. The knots? Quantity. You realize she's just shown you her harvest log. No ink, no parchment, just a tangle of string with more reliability than your last 3 grocery lists. Fun fact, the Inca had no wheels, no currency, and no iron tools. But they still managed to keep track of tributes, labor taxes, meter, population data, and resource distribution using quipus. It's like running Amazon logistics with yarn. And here's where it gets even better, the Inca didn't just rely on the quipu. They had a full messenger system, with chasquis, fleet-footed runners stationed every few kilometers along the empire's vast road network. Each runner would carry quipus and pass them like high-stakes batons. Some estimates suggest a message could travel over 200 miles in a single day. Historians still debate whether the chasquis were the world's first postal workers or the earliest endurance athletes, but one thing's for sure, they did not skip leg day. You watch another messenger disappear down a stone path, his quipu bouncing at his side like some ancient fanny pack of secrets. You try tying a few knots yourself, just for fun. The result looks more like a tangled shoelace than a taxation record. A passing elder frowns at your attempt and gently removes the cord from your hands, muttering something that's probably the Quechua equivalent of "bless your heart." And here's a strange but delightful tidbit: some quipus contain knots that don't seem to follow any numeric pattern. Could they be names? Places? Entire narratives? Historians still argue about that one. Some believe the Inca may have encoded full stories using complex knot combinations, while others think we're just romanticizing ancient Excel sheets. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, like a mysterious, knotted novella lost to time. By now, you're starting to get it. This is a civilization that counted without counting out loud. That told stories without saying a word. That managed an empire with nothing but roads, runners, and string. And if you're feeling a little in awe, good. You should be. Because this is only the beginning. You wake up to the sound of sandals slapping against stone again. Another Chusky is sprinting past, his face the picture of calm determination, his breath even despite the thin air. If marathons existed here, he'd win them without spilling his corn beer. You follow, curiosity pulling at your feet. Today, you're shadowing the ancient world's most elite delivery service. The Chaskis are no joke. These messengers are the neural network of the Inca Empire. No wheels, remember? No horses in the highlands. These runners relied on two very underrated technologies, legs and lungs. They dashed across thousands of miles of stone-paved roads, known as the Kapaknan, which stretched like veins across the empire's mountainous spine. Each Chusky station, or tambos, is spaced roughly 6 to 9 kilometers apart. You stop at one, it's a small stone hut stocked with dried meat, water, and, of course, quipus. A runner arrives, barely winded, and hands off his quipu to the next guy in line. They exchange a nod, no words. And off he goes. Efficiency that makes Amazon look like a carrier pigeon startup. But here's the twist: the quipu isn't the only thing being transferred. Each Chusky is trained to memorize the oral message that goes with it. Yeah. It's not just string math, it's storytelling under pressure. The string holds the structure, the human voice, the meaning. It's like sending a PDF with a live TED Talk attached. Now you, brave and slightly wheezy volunteer, are offered the chance to deliver a message. The next runner hands you a short quipu, about 6 strings, and mouths a few phrases in Quechua. You smile, nod confidently, and promptly forget half of it. Classic. You begin the run, legs wobbling, sandals flapping like panicked ducks. The path is merciless, cliffs on one side, llamas judging you on the other. Halfway through, your lungs scream mutiny, and you consider asking the next Chusky for a piggyback ride. But you press on. Because this is history. And also because the llama is still watching. By the time you reach the next tambo, you're gasping and sweaty. You hand off the quipu with all the dignity of someone who just ran uphill at altitude with the grace of a dropped potato. The recipient frowns. You realize you've mixed up 2 key words. What you said was something like, "The emperor requests 20 alpacas for dinner," but it came out more like, "The emperor is becoming 20 alpacas by dinner." Close enough? A fun historical note here: Chaskis often carried conch shells to blow like horns and alert others of their arrival. It was both practical and dramatic. A little I have entered the building flourish with a side of mountain echo. Curiously, most Chaskis were young men, selected and trained for speed, memory, and endurance. The system was so efficient, it helped the Inca control an empire that stretched across much of western South America, from Colombia to Chile. Roads, messengers, and knotted cords. The holy trinity of Inca logistics. You collapse near a stone wall, watching the sun dip below a jagged ridge. Another runner passes, this time carrying a quipu with 30 cords. You wonder how many stories it holds. Census data? War preparations? A really intense grocery list? Historians still debate the full extent of what quipus could communicate. Some scholars argue they were strictly numeric, a record of quantities and categories. Others believe they carried syntax, a kind of binary structure that allowed for abstract messages. One Yale researcher even found quipus with repeating sequences, suggesting a form of written grammar. But since the Spanish wiped out much of the oral tradition that would have decoded these chords, we're left with educated guesswork and a lot of awe. You stare at your hands. The blisters I knew, the breath still shallow. But there's a weird sense of accomplishment. You may not be fluent in chord knots, but you felt the rhythm of the empire. The heartbeat between rocks, sandals, and silence. And in that silence, numbers speak louder than words. The next morning, you're not so much awake as you are conscious with regrets. Your calves are singing an off-key symphony, and the altitude has conspired with gravity to make standing a full-contact sport. But there's no time to wallow. Today, you finally get your hands on a full quipu. The village elder greets you with the kind of cautious optimism usually reserved for toddlers near expensive vases. He places the object on the table like a sacred relic. And it is. A complete, functioning quipu, a primary horizontal string, thicker than the rest, with dozens of pendant cords hanging like jungle vines, each a different color, length, and knot configuration. At first glance, it's chaos. Like your headphones after 2 minutes in your pocket. But look closer and patterns begin to emerge. The cords are grouped. The knots are spaced precisely. Some dangle freely, others have smaller cords branching off them like family trees. You can almost hear the information humming. Here's where it gets brainy, the knots follow a decimal system. Yeah, a base 10 structure centuries before calculators were cool. A single knot in a certain position can mean 3. 3 knots elsewhere might mean 300. It's like a Beanie Baby collection, but every one is a digit in a number line. You're handed a small cheat sheet. Not written, of course, but demonstrated by an elder using sticks and potatoes. One string equals one item. Knot type equals value. Position equals place value. It clicks. Example, a brown string with a single figure 8 knot halfway down. That might mean 1,000 potatoes. A red string with 3 overhand knots near the end. 3 warriors. Each color represents a category: food, people, textiles, maybe even taxes. It's as if the quipu is an analog blockchain, a tamper-proof record of data stored in yarn instead of silicon. You attempt to make your own. A modest quipu of 5 chords. You assign blue to maize, green to coca leaves, and yellow to alpacas. The knots are serviceable. You present it with a flourish, and the elder nods. Kind of. Probably just being polite. He later uses it as a curtain tie. In Inca society, quipus weren't just common, they were everywhere. Every village had them. They tracked census data, military recruitment, harvest yields, and religious rituals. Each region sent its own quipus to the imperial capital, Cusco, where master record keepers, Quipucamayac, verified and logged the data. And here's the kicker, it all worked. The empire functioned. The people paid their taxes in labor or goods, the fields were cultivated, the storehouses filled. No coins, no receipts, just cords and trust. Fun fact, many of the Quipucamayac were also trained in oral history. They could read the quipu while reciting the accompanying narrative, like a one-man show of data and drama. Some say they could recall entire generations of tribute records and tax rosters. Others believe they memorized regional myths, encoded in complex knot series. A human USB drive in a poncho. And now, the weird part, some quipus don't contain any known numbers at all. just intricate knot patterns and color sequences. Historians still debate if these were ceremonial, mnemonic, or something we haven't even guessed. Were they musical scores? Legal contracts? A love letter? Maybe the first season of a telenovela? As you study one of these enigmatic chords, you start to wonder. What would your own life look like in quipu form? One chord for sleep, knots few and erratic, one for coffee, long, tight, one for awkward social encounters, heavily knotted, deeply tangled. A surprisingly accurate autobiography. And as the sun sets, you sit surrounded by strings, not entangled, but connected. Not bound, but understood. Each thread a thought. Each knot a memory. The Inca didn't just tie chords. They tied communities. And tomorrow, you'll tie your first real message. You sit cross-legged on a llama wool mat, the tools of your trade before you, a primary string, several lengths of dyed cord, and a bowl of toasted corn you're pretending is brain fuel. Today is the day you graduate from quipu observer to quipu creator. Or at least, that's the plan. You've been given a simple assignment: record an inventory of potatoes from 3 nearby farms. Potatoes. The sacred starch of the Andes. The Inca cultivated hundreds of varieties, from tiny, knobby purple ones to large, golden, football-shaped behemoths. Each type had its use, some for storage, some for rituals, and some, presumably, just for bragging rights. You start with the basics. First chord, deep brown. You assign it to the Papa Negra. The farmer tells you he harvested 4,320 tubers. You break it down into digits, using the decimal system: 4,000s, 300s, 2 10s, and no 1s. Carefully, you tie the proper knots in the correct place values. It takes 10 minutes, 2 do-overs, and 1 accidental overhand knot that you later claim was intentional flair. Second chord, golden yellow for Papa Blanca. Total, 2,775. Easier. You're getting into a rhythm now: loop, pull, tighten. You start humming. The knots seem to hum back. Third chord, red for the Papa Sangre de Condor. Spooky name. Delicious root. Quantity, 1,112. And that's where you mess up. A hasty knot in the wrong place, and suddenly the quipu reads as 11,120. A solid way to mess with the potato economy of the entire region. This is the moment you understand how high the stakes were for Inca quipu makers. One wrong knot could mean 10 extra workers pulled for the meter labor tax, or a shipment of grain sent to the wrong province. And unlike your mistake, no one in the 15th century was going to solve the problem with a quick Ctrl+Z. The elder corrects your work with the gentlest sigh imaginable. He doesn't scold. Just reties it silently, like a parent fixing a child's shoelaces. You nod in appreciation, and maybe mild shame. This is the brilliance of the system: tactile, visual, and efficient. Quipus allowed even remote villages to communicate detailed information to central authorities. And they did it all without ever needing to write a single word. Historians agree on the numerical use of quipus. That part is solid. But here comes the debate: were there literary quipus? Were some knots used symbolically to represent ideas, not just numbers? The Spanish chronicler Felipe Guamin Poma de Ayala claimed the Inca had books made of chords, full of history and stories. Yet we haven't found any modern key to fully read them. It's like holding a novel but missing the Rosetta Stone. Back in your potato mission, you're starting to see how memory plays a role. Even with the knots, you have to know what each chord represents. The color tells you it's potatoes, but which kind? What farm? What date? That's where the oral tradition came in. The quipu wasn't meant to exist in isolation. It was a partner to spoken knowledge. A prompt. A memory trigger. In essence, the quipu was an early form of data compression. You didn't write out the full sentence, "We harvested 2,775 white potatoes in June from field B." Instead, you encoded that sentence in structured threads, and trusted a trained person to decode it with context. And speaking of context, here's a delightfully strange bit: some quipus have chords tied at angles, like a V shape instead of a straight dangle. Some scholars think this might denote relational data, parent-child, superior-subordinate, or even cause-effect. It's the ancient Andean version of a flowchart. You lean back and stare at your finished product. It's not perfect, but it's readable. The elder gives you a small smile and, with ceremony, hangs your quipu next to the others in the village hall. Congratulations, you've officially added your voice to the silent chorus of Inca record keepers. As dusk settles, you sit quietly. The wind plays with the chords, making them sway gently like they're breathing. Somewhere, a child is being taught the colors and knots. Somewhere else, a runner prepares to carry a new report. You realize, this empire speaks in threads, and for the first time, you're part of the conversation. The next day, you wake up with renewed purpose, and maybe a slight knot in your back to match the ones in your chords. Today's goal: understanding the deeper structure behind these deceptively simple strings. It's time to go from counting potatoes to deciphering patterns in the fabric of empire itself. You're invited into the workspace of one of the village's quipu, the keeper of the knots. He's hunched over a wide table layered with dozens of quipus, his fingers moving like a concert pianist's. He doesn't look up as you enter. Instead, he gestures for you to sit and hands you a bundle of chords with an expression that says, "Let's see what you've got, rookie." What you have is confusion. At first, everything seems random. Colors appear out of order. Knots aren't evenly spaced. Some chords are tightly grouped, others trail off with elegant loneliness. But then, something clicks. This isn't chaos, it's jazz. Structured improvisation. You begin to see categories within categories. One primary string doesn't just carry individual data, it connects substrings. Think of it as folders within folders, like the world's first nested spreadsheet. You find one section tracking llamas, color for llama type, knots for count, direction of chord twist possibly indicating age or sex. Another section tracks textiles, chords bunched together to reflect seasonal production spikes. Suddenly, the quipu is speaking to you in a strange but compelling dialect of loops and logic. Here's a wild twist: some quipus have zero values, places where a knot should be but isn't. That's right. The concept of zero, often attributed to Babylonian or Indian math, was independently grasped by the Inca too. In a string-based language. It's like discovering your cat understands calculus, but only through yarn. And as your eyes adjust to the rhythm of these knots, you start to feel something weirdly modern about it all. This system doesn't just store data, it structures it. It's relational. It's hierarchical. It's coded. It's a pre-digital database, built by people in tunics and sandals who probably never imagined a microchip but would have absolutely nailed a data science course. Fun fact time: archaeologists have found quipus in administrative centers like Purachuco, each one slightly different in structure depending on its purpose. Some have as few as 10 chords, others hundreds. Some used in the highlands, others along the coast. Like regional dialects of knot language. And yet, they all fed into a central logic, like regional offices syncing to the main server in Cusco. You pause to sip a warm drink the locals call chicha morada, a purple corn-based refreshment that tastes like spiced juice and low-stakes rebellion. The quipu leans in and places a hand on your quipu from yesterday. He unknots one string, reties it 2 fingers higher, and points to a neighboring chord. Suddenly, the data makes more sense. It's like he adjusted a filter on your Excel sheet, and boom, clarity. There's a theory, one still hotly debated, that quipus weren't just used for logistics but also encoded principles of Inca cosmology. Some patterns mirror celestial cycles or sacred numbers tied to mountain deities. Historians argue whether this was coincidence or intentional, but let's be honest, if you've ever written a password with symbolic meaning, you get it. Later, the quipu shows you something rare, a quipu with small colored tabs woven between knots. These aren't part of the main numeric system. He explains, through a series of gestures and low humming sounds, that these could be memory markers, triggers for oral recitation. In modern terms? Sticky notes for the brain. It hits you, the quipu isn't just a tool. It's a map of how people thought. Not just what they counted, but how they connected those counts to meaning. These chords represent a worldview, a tactile epistemology. You try one final exercise, decoding an old, archived quipu labeled with a llama symbol. It's long, frayed, dusty with time. You identify sections that seem to represent routes, maybe trade paths. A branching section with uneven knots could be a disruption, a flood? A war? A festival? You're not sure. The data stops halfway through. Maybe the runner never made it. Maybe the story never got told. But that's the thing about stories made of knots, they may fray, but they never fully disappear. As you leave the workshop, dusk settling in again, you feel the air shift. You're not just learning a system. You're learning how a civilization saw its place in the world, chord by chord, knot by knot. And tomorrow, you'll try to send a message of your own. You wake with the ambition of a fresh graduate and the nervous energy of someone who just realized today's the final exam. Your mission? Send an actual quipu message to a neighboring village. Seems simple, until you remember that a mistied knot could spark a diplomatic incident or accidentally command the delivery of 40 baskets of guinea pigs. You're escorted to the community's small messaging station, a shaded stone alcove where chaskis stretch and snack like ancient Olympic athletes. The elder from the previous day gives you a freshly woven primary chord and a nod that feels way too trusting. Your message is straightforward, harvest complete. Send 5 baskets of coca leaves in return. It's an exchange between communities, a classic Andean barter scenario. You break it down. Brown string, harvest report. Knots equals total yield. Green string, coca leaf request. Knots equals quantity. A purple loop at the base to denote the current lunar phase, a common time marker, you're told. So far, so good. You double-check your knots, then check again. Each one is tight, symmetrical, and placed exactly. You're either getting better or your fingers are faking confidence. Now comes the oral part. A quipu recites the message to the chuzki while showing the quipu. It's like pairing a podcast with a chart. The runner memorizes it with monk-like calm, then tucks the cord bundle under his sash and takes off. No drama. No fanfare. Just pure, silent competence sprinting into the horizon. You, however, are sweating like a turkey on festival day. What if the quipu is misread? What if your knots are interpreted as send 50 warriors instead of 5 baskets? What if the purple loop is seen as a request for ceremonial dancers? There are no take-backs in fiber optics made of wool. But the elder pats your shoulder and says, you've done what many could not, you made a message without a mouth. You'll take that as a win. Now for the wait. 3 days later, the runner returns. He's carrying another quipu, shorter, with one plump red cord and a yellow one that smells faintly of dried leaves. The quipu reads it aloud, nodding as he goes. Message received. Exchange accepted. Coca leaves en route. Good knots. You almost cry. The experience shifts something in you. Not just the thrill of successful communication, but the realization of just how sophisticated the system is. With no formal written language, the Incas created a network of trust, mathematics, and memory. Every quipu is both literal and metaphorical, a connection. A bridge. A handshake made of string. Here's where things get spicy. Some researchers believe the quipu was capable of conveying abstract ideas. A certain combination of knots and colors might imply relationships, causes, obligations. Others caution against over-romanticizing. It was just accounting, they say. No poetry, no storytelling. But then why the non-numeric quipus? Why the ones with unusual shapes, or added feathers, or asymmetrical chord groupings? Historians still debate whether the Inca developed a true writing system. But your time in the highlands says yes, just not one we're used to. It wasn't phonetic. It didn't need to be. It was direct, memorable, and surprisingly nuanced. The closest thing today? Some say it's coding. Others say it's music notation. One archaeologist even likened quipus to sheet music for the empire. The knots were notes, the chords were bars, and the quipucamayak were the conductors. Now imagine trying to debug a line of music. With yarn. While sitting on a mountain. You return to your mat that night and stare at the stars. The sky above the Andes feels more crowded than usual, as if the celestial quipu is laid out above you, each constellation a node in a cosmic database. Somewhere up there, maybe the gods are also reading knots. And down here, you finally feel like you're part of the dialogue. The following morning, you're summoned before a trio of the village's most experienced quipucamayak. Not ominous at all. They sit cross-legged on woven mats in a shaded room filled with hanging cords, each one gently swaying like the slow breath of the past. They motion for you to sit, and then they test you. Without warning, they drop a quipu in your lap. It's an old one, faded strings, aged knots, but structurally intact. You're given a single instruction: tell us what it says. No pressure. You breathe deeply and begin your examination. You identify the primary chord and work your way down. You recognize the color coding: brown for food, red for tribute, yellow for textiles. The knots follow the decimal logic, but the spacing feels odd. There's a pattern, but it doesn't match the agricultural quipus you've seen before. You speak carefully. This appears to be a record of tribute from a coastal village. Fish stock? And cloth donations. But you pause. One segment looks irregular. This section might not be quantity. It might be sequence. The elders nod. One raises an eyebrow in what you pray is approval. You've stumbled upon a subtlety that separates novices from masters. Some chords didn't track numbers but order. A reminder that the quipu wasn't always about how much, but sometimes about when. That's the secret sauce of the quipucamayak. They weren't just accountants. They were memory artists. Trained from childhood to not only read quipus but to perform them. They could recite entire census reports, tax records, and migration data. But they could also trigger historical events, myths, and genealogies using just a few chords. Fun fact, the training of a quipucamayak was intense. They learned color coding, knot placement, numerical conversions, and symbolic associations. And it wasn't solitary. It was a guild-like system, knowledge passed down orally and tactilely, like master chefs training apprentices, except the ingredients were wool and memory. As your examination ends, one elder brings out a different kind of quipu, smaller, more decorative, with feathers woven between the chords and unusually intricate knots. This isn't logistics. This is storytelling. These are quipus de canto, he says. Song quipus. They're rare, mostly ceremonial, and incredibly controversial. Some scholars believe they encoded ritual chants or sacred stories. Others claim there's no proof of phonetic meaning, that it's all symbolic filler. But the elders here? They know better. They remember the melodies passed through generations, even if the words were lost to time. He hands it to you. You hold it reverently as the elder hums a slow tune, each note matched by a touch on a knot. The song tells of a time when mountains walked, when rivers listened, and when the stars could be counted on one hand. You don't understand every word. But the feeling? Unmistakable. Reverence. Wonder. Home. This is when it hits you, the quipu weren't just number nerds. They were historians. Poets. Guardians of collective memory. In a world without books, they were the living libraries. And the quipu? Not a relic. A living script, read not just by eyes and fingers, but by heart. You're handed a test: create your own quipu de canto. It doesn't need to be perfect, they say. It just needs to mean something. You choose 5 chords, each representing a moment from your journey so far. You add a feather for your first message sent. A shell bead for the runner who delivered it. A single loose knot to mark the mistake you made, because hey, humility is part of the song. And finally, a loop at the end, unfinished. An invitation for the story to continue. The elders take it, examine it, and, after a long pause, place it gently among their collection. Not bad, rookie. Not bad. That night, you dream of strings in the sky. Each star a knot. Each constellation a quipu waiting to be read. Somewhere in your sleep, the wind hums a melody, slow, sacred, and familiar. And tomorrow, you'll meet the ones who could recall an empire by touch alone. Morning breaks with the smell of toasted maize and cold mountain air, and you're led up a narrow path to a stone terrace overlooking the valley. It's quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind and a rooster who clearly didn't get this peaceful empire's memo. Today, you're meeting the memory makers, the walking hard drives of the Inca world. You find them seated under a sun canopy, 5 senior quipu, each with fingers more agile than your Wi-Fi signal. They're old but sharp, and their gazes hold the weight of entire provinces. They're reviewing a set of massive quipus, long primary chords with dozens of pendant strings, some layered 3 or 4 levels deep. The whole thing looks like a spider web had a really productive quarter. Here's where the real magic happens: the quipu don't just interpret the knots. They recite them. You sit cross-legged, and one of them begins. He reads a quipu from the regional archives, the census quipu. His voice is low and even, like the steady tick of a grandfather clock. In the year of the twin rains, 420 people. 103 children. 7 elders. 60 warriors. 8 deaths. His hands brush over the knots as he speaks. No stumbles. No hesitations. It's like watching someone read a novel from Braille, except the story is math. The message becomes clear: this isn't about memorization alone. It's about association. Every number has a context: families, fields, debts, diseases, festivals. The quipu is the spine. The oral tradition is the body. This, you learn, is how the Inca governed such a massive empire with no written alphabet. From Cusco, the Sapa Inca, essentially emperor and divine sunchild in one majestic human, issued mandates. Regional governors collected data, local quipu tied the quipus, and runners delivered the updates. Everything from census reports to grain yields to the whereabouts of gold artisans was recorded, remembered, and re-verified across distances and mountains. And when things got serious, there were audits. Yes, audits. Periodically, new quipu were sent to cross-check quipus from different villages. If the numbers didn't match, there were consequences. Grain discrepancies might mean a village owed extra tribute. Too many unregistered llamas? Expect a polite but firm visit from someone with a clipboard made of stone. One elder shows you a correction quipu, extra chords added to a previously recorded set. It's color-coded in red, the traditional symbol for warning or oversight. The message: this has been amended. Ancient accountability, one knot at a time. Fun fact, the Inca were so obsessed with data integrity that they used redundancy as a system check. Two different quipu would often tie separate quipus of the same event. The cords had to match. If they didn't, someone had to explain why. No hiding behind accidental typos. Modern scholars have debated the complexity of this system for decades. Some say it's purely numerical. Others argue for linguistic nuance. A recent discovery in the ruins of Incahuasi, a site north of Lima, found a collection of quipus with repeated sequences, almost like phrases. Are these words? Phrases? Coded commands? We don't fully know yet, but the mystery is delicious. You're given a chance to read a quipu aloud. A small one. Just a labor record. Your voice shakes slightly. Village X. 52 workers sent, road maintenance. 3 weeks, return date marked. The elders nod. You've captured the basics. The content is dry, sure, but the delivery? Acceptable. One even smiles, a tiny, satisfied grin you'll treasure forever. You leave the terrace buzzing with respect. Not just for the complexity of the quipu system, but for the minds that kept it alive. The quipu weren't passive calculators. They were bureaucrats, archivists, storytellers, and human Google Sheets, all rolled into one. As night falls, you walk past the village hall, where fresh quipus are being tied for the upcoming solstice festival. There's a string for maize, one for chicha, one for offerings, and one, just one, for ceremonial llamas. No one wants a repeat of last year's llama incident. You realize now that silence never meant absence here. It meant order. It meant structure. It meant thousands of people working in harmony, guided not by decrees carved in stone, but by strings looped by hand. Tomorrow, you'll visit a storehouse and see how even potatoes had their own knotted resumes. The sun is already high when you reach the edge of what looks like a long, stone bunker. Except this isn't a fort or a prison. It's a kolka, an Inca storehouse. And inside? An embarrassment of logistical riches, sacks of maize, bundles of coca leaves, salted fish wrapped in dried reeds, and yes, enough potatoes to feed a mid-sized rebellion. You step in cautiously, greeted by cool, dry air and a subtle scent of preserved tuber and earthy order. It's not chaos in here. It's not even rustic. It's meticulous. Like a medieval Whole Foods with better altitude tolerance. Every item is sorted and labeled, not with signs or stickers, but with quipus. Each storage shelf has a small bundle of cords attached to it. You pick one up, green cord, 2 figure-8 knots, and a red secondary cord branching off. A local explains, 300 coca bundles. 30 dried. That red branch? A modifier. A note within a note. Suddenly, you're deep in ancient inventory management. Here's the genius of it, these storehouses weren't just barns. They were regional hubs in a sprawling network that allowed the empire to respond quickly to disasters, warfare, or surpluses. Crops from productive regions were sent to less fertile ones. In times of drought, extra food was distributed swiftly. And at the heart of it all? Those fuzzy, deceptively humble quipus. You try deciphering another, a blue primary cord, short with tight, vertical knots. It's cooler to the touch, maybe because it was hung near the ice cellars. The elder laughs and confirms your guess. Frozen fish, he says, then adds, still good. From the coast. 3 moons ago. Let's pause to appreciate this, coastal fish. In the Andes. Still edible. All because of an empire that used llama-based logistics, elevation-based refrigeration, and yarn-based data retention. And here's a little-known quirk: some storehouses used color-coded bags that matched the quipu cords. This added a visual reinforcement system to make identification easier for those less trained in quipu reading. Not quite a barcode, but pretty close. You take a moment to reflect on just how much data flows through this system. Every head of corn, every woven tunic, every jar of pickled pepper paste, recorded. Categorized. Noted. No app. No paper. Just cord and cognition. There's one quipu that catches your eye. It's large, heavily used, slightly frayed. The cords are stained in places, maybe chicha, maybe the blood of too many potatoes. The elder calls it the seasonal ledger. It tracks storage levels throughout the year. You notice the peaks around harvest time, the dips during festivals and road building seasons. It's like a heartbeat, woven into string. Here's your academic zinger. Historians still argue whether the Inca used quipus for predictive planning, like forecasting harvests or population changes. Some say it's possible. Others think the quipu was purely reactive. But as you hold this one, with its clear patterns of ebb and flow, you can't help but feel it was more than passive record-keeping. It was strategy in textile form. You're allowed to tie one yourself. A small cord, color of your choice, to add to the record. You pick a burnt orange, an appropriate nod to sweet potatoes, obviously, and log the visitor, 1, helped carry 4 sacks of maize. Complained about altitude 6 times. It's accepted into the record with a laugh. Fun fact, the Inca Empire had no market economy. No currency. Everything was based on reciprocity and redistribution. You worked. You ate. You contributed to the community. The community took care of you. And all of that, all of it, was tracked through systems like this. As the afternoon wanes, a group of villagers arrives, carrying new supplies. The Quipucamayak step forward and begin the ritual of documentation, cords measured, knots tied, colors chosen. You watch, not as a visitor, but as someone who now understands the language. You see what they're doing, and why. And in the quiet of that storehouse, beneath the shadow of a mountain that hasn't blinked in millennia, you realize something: this isn't just history. It's function. It's living memory. A way of counting that doesn't speak, but never forgets. Tomorrow, you'll look to the stars and learn how even the cosmos was counted in knots. You wake up before dawn, summoned to a hilltop that overlooks both the valley below and the heavens above. Your guide today is an elder astronomer priest, draped in a robe woven with symbols you don't recognize, spirals, triangles, stylized llamas doing what you assume are sacred dances. He hands you a quipu. But this one isn't for counting potatoes. It's for counting time. The cords are arranged differently. Fewer knots, more spacing, and distinct color pairings: gold and midnight blue, red and silver gray. The elder tilts your chin upward, motioning to the sky just as the first rays of sun peak above the mountains. This, he says, is where it all begins. The Inca didn't just measure the earth. They measured the heavens. They tracked the solstices, equinoxes, lunar phases, and planetary movements with a precision that still baffles modern archaeologists. And they did it not with telescopes, but with stone alignments, shadow tracking, and, you guessed it, quipus. Your current quipu isn't a record of crops or tax. It's a calendar. The golden cord represents the sun, and each pendant cord represents a day, marked by tiny knots that signify lunar phases, solar zeniths, and specific rituals. You find a cord marked with 3 symmetrical knots and a shell bead. That, the elder says, is Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. It's coming soon. Each region of the empire had its own ways of observing the sky, but the quipu system allowed them to standardize it all. From the coast to the cloud forest, Quipucamayak recorded celestial events and synchronized festivals. Like a cosmic Google Calendar, only way more durable and waterproof. And here's a peculiar twist: some quipus were never stored in bags or archives. They were worn, tied around the waist or draped across the chest during rituals. They were symbols of status, of knowledge, of connection to the divine. You're told that only trained priests were allowed to carry certain astronomical quipus. It was a privilege and a responsibility. You're invited to try one on. It feels heavy in your hands, not physically, but intellectually. You understand the weight of centuries encoded in a series of colored knots. You loop it over your shoulders, awkwardly at first, then with growing reverence. The wind catches one of the longer cords and it dances like a sundial trying to stretch. Now comes the fun bit: quipu-based predictions. The elder points to a series of cords that indicate a past eclipse. He ties a new one, shorter, but with similar spacing. This one, he says, foretells the next. It's not magic. It's math. Patterns observed, recorded, repeated. Modern scholars are still scratching their heads about the full extent of this practice. Some argue quipus were used to track and predict astronomical cycles with surprising accuracy. Others say we're reading too much into loops of wool. But then again, those same skeptics never watched a solar priest sing the sunrise while holding a quipu like a cosmic violin. As the sun rises higher, you notice how the light strikes a specific stone nearby. A line of shadow cuts across a carved groove. The elder nods. Mid-season, he says. Time to prepare the terraces. That information, this moment, is tied into the quipu. A short knot is added. A cord is shifted. Like updating a live feed with the most recent cosmic post. Fun fact: the Inca capital, Cusco, was laid out in the shape of a puma, and its temples and streets aligned with solstices and star paths. The quipu calendar you're studying today? It helped coordinate massive ceremonies involving tens of thousands of people. No clock towers. No digital reminders. Just the heavens, the hills, and a handful of master knotters. You're handed a blank cord and asked to tie today's sky: clear, bright, favorable. You loop one knot for the sunrise, a smaller one for the light wind, and add a feather to mark your presence. The elder tucks it into the end of his ceremonial quipu without a word. It's accepted. As the sun warms the stones, you look at your hands. Yesterday, they counted food. Today, they've counted stars. And in both cases, they've tied you to something larger than yourself. Tomorrow, you'll return to the people, and see what happens when your knots are misread. You return from the hilltop flush with confidence and cosmic energy. You've logged potatoes, tracked moons, and dressed like a celestial librarian. You're starting to feel like a real quipucamayak, until, of course, you absolutely ruin everything. It starts innocently enough. You've been asked to help prepare a tribute report to be delivered to a neighboring village. Simple stuff: update a quipu to reflect the most recent harvest, note the contributions of each household, and indicate how many woven textiles will be offered in exchange. You tie the cords carefully. Red for maize. Green for coca. Pale blue for wool. You check your knot spacing, your value placement. All looks good. Feeling bold, you add a small extra loop on the final cord. A personal flourish. Like signing your name with a little star over the I. You hand it off to the runner with a proud smile. 3 days later, the messenger returns. With a crowd. The village chief from the receiving end is here, looking bemused. Behind him, a group of dancers. And a llama. Wearing a garland. There's music. There's chicha. There's a ceremonial mat. And then there's you, confused and rapidly panicking as the quipucamayak begins to read your quipu aloud. Apparently, that extra loop you added? It wasn't decorative. It was interpreted as a formal invitation to a marriage alliance festival between your village and theirs. Oops. To be fair, the knot you tied isn't one normally used in harvest reports. It's reserved for social arrangements, birth announcements, initiation ceremonies, and yes, romantic partnerships. The placement, the type of loop, the added feather you stuck in for flair. Yeah, that sealed the deal. Literally. And here's where it gets wild, no one's angry. In fact, the neighboring chief thinks it's an honor. They've arrived ready to negotiate the terms of this sudden unification. People are offering gifts. Musicians are playing. You've invented a festival, by accident. You try to explain that it was a mistake. Just a decorative knot. The room erupts in polite, confused laughter. One elder pats your shoulder and says, "Even mistaken knots speak truth." That's the thing with quipus. Unlike written language, they are not easily revised. There's no erasing a knot. Once tied and interpreted, it becomes part of the record. And reinterpretations? Totally possible. Historians believe some quipus may have had multiple readings depending on context, numeric, symbolic, poetic. Fun fact, some ancient quipus include decorative elements, shells, feathers, beads, that aren't strictly data. Scholars are still unsure what they represent. Could be rank, could be emotion, could be subtle cues like approach this message with joy or bring extra potatoes, this one's important. Maybe you accidentally stumbled into a whole new interpretive genre, quipu fan fiction. The diplomatic crisis turned party continues well into the night. Someone starts dancing. The llama sneezes. You're handed a wooden cup of chicha and told, this is your fault. Drink it. You take a sip and sit under a woven canopy watching stars flicker overhead. Maybe the system isn't broken. Maybe it's just flexible. After all, the Inca world wasn't one of rigid scripts, it was one of rhythm, repetition, and deeply contextual meaning. Historians today still debate the implications of this. Is the ambiguity in quipus a bug or a feature? Some argue that the variability makes them unreliable. Others believe it's precisely what made them so adaptable. A blend of numbers, memory, and meaning woven to fit the moment. And your moment? Accidentally legendary. Before the party ends, one of the quipucamayak gives you a ceremonial cord, a single loop with 2 tiny knots. For you, he says. A reminder, not all mistakes are wrong. You smile, place it in your bag, and quietly vow to triple-check every knot from now on. Tomorrow, you'll visit a place where the minds behind the quipus were trained, and find out what it takes to learn silence with precision. After yesterday's accidental festival fiasco, and let's admit it, surprisingly successful diplomatic summit, you're ready to get serious again. No more expressive flourishes. Today, you're visiting a training center for quipucamayak. Think of it as the Ivy League of Inca knot knowledge, minus the debt and pretentious Latin mottos. The school isn't marked by signs. Instead, you follow a footpath lined with stones carved with subtle geometric symbols, patterns that, you learn, correspond to different types of data categories: labor, tribute, astronomy, genealogy. You're already in class before you realize it. The complex itself is modest: stone walls, open courtyards, shaded workspaces. But the atmosphere buzzes with quiet intensity. Students, mostly teenagers and young adults, sit in rows, each working on their own training quipu. Some are copying from master chords, others are being tested with oral memory drills. The only sound is the rustle of chord and the occasional rustle of self-doubt. Your guide is a middle-aged instructor with the world's most symmetrical eyebrows and the calm energy of someone who never miscounts anything, ever. He hands you a starter set, 10 primary chords, each representing a different province of the empire. Your job? Simulate a tribute report based on fictional harvest numbers. You gulp. It's pretend, but the pressure is real. Step 1. Choosing colors. Easy enough. Yellow for maize, red for chili peppers, brown for llama wool. You already feel like a quipu barista. Step 2. Values. You convert quantities into the decimal not system, hundreds at the top, tens in the middle, units at the bottom. One missed placement and suddenly a village is sending 1,000 llamas instead of 10. No pressure. Step 3. Cross-referencing. You add small, secondary chords to note the time of year and the status of the tribute, delivered, delayed, or in a llama traffic. You joke. No one laughs. This is serious string business. You glance over at another student's work. Their quipu is dazzling, not just neat, but rhythmic, like the knots were placed to a silent song. Your instructor leans in and says, he's training for state-level work. He'll record troop movements. You feel the awe settle in. These aren't just nerdy craftspeople. They are national infrastructure. Every decimal knot is a brick in the empire's foundation. And every student here is expected to memorize not just technique, but content. A single error isn't just wrong, it misinforms leadership, shifts policies, affects lives. Fun fact, scholars believe there were different classes of quipu kamayak. Some specialized in agriculture, others in census data, and some in ceremonial knowledge. It was a deeply stratified but highly respected role. To be chosen for training was an honor. To graduate was to hold the memory of a nation in your hands. You're allowed to observe a memory exercise. An instructor reads a list of statistics, population numbers, crop yields, soldier counts, and the student must tie a quipu from memory without looking back. Then, another student must read the quipu and recite the original numbers. It's a game of telephone with cordage, and these kids are nailing it. One segment involves oral storytelling. The student is given a knot pattern and must recite the corresponding myth it triggers. It's a test of associative memory, not rote memorization. The quipu isn't the story, it's the spark. You hear tales of mountain gods who disguised themselves as condors, rivers that wept salt, and children who turned into stars. Each narrative launched by the lightest tug on the right string. Your instructor gives you a final task: create a quipu to summarize your journey so far. You pause. How do you encode or? Llamas? Mistakes that were festivals? You settle on 6 chords. A gold one with a single knot, your arrival. A brown one with 4, the potato inventory. A red one with a soft twist, the tribute mix-up. A green one with alternating knots, your first real message. A black one with a loop, the stargazing quipu. A blue one with a feather, the mistake that became memory. You present it. The instructor reads it, then nods slowly. Not perfect, he says. But accurate. You remember well. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the courtyard, you sit with the other students, winding spare cords around your fingers. There's a quiet camaraderie here. These learners aren't just training to memorize. They're training to preserve, to pass on the rhythm of a civilization that chose not to write, but to weave. And tomorrow, you'll meet the elite, the record keepers of the royal court, where quipus didn't just track data, they controlled destiny. You travel to Cusco with your feet sore, your bag heavier with cords, and your head swirling with color-coded decimals and ceremonial loops. You've tied quipus in storehouses and terraces, under the stars and beside riverbanks, but now you're headed for the apex of it all, the royal quipu keepers. The capital of the empire is a symphony of stone. Streets paved so precisely you could roll a grain of quinoa down them without a bounce. Buildings fit together without mortar, just rock on rock, like they whispered before settling. And among these perfect walls lies the Yashe Wazi, the house of knowledge. This is where the elite quipu kamayak live and work, those chosen to serve the Sapa Inca himself. They are the final filter between the empire's chaos and the emperor's calm. You walk in and immediately feel the difference. The quipus here are larger, more complex, and frighteningly symmetrical. Some hang from wooden racks taller than you. Others are stored in ornate chests, wrapped in embroidered cloths like sacred scrolls. Your guide, an impeccably dressed official who probably dreams in decimal, welcomes you with minimal words and maximum posture. You will observe. You will not touch, he says. A reasonable request. He leads you into the central chamber. There, 5 senior quipu kamayak are analyzing a report on labor quotas from the northern provinces. One reads, one confirms, one adjusts a chord just slightly, turning a 20th into a 200 and changing the future of an entire mountain town. It's precision with consequences. These weren't just data nerds. They were gatekeepers of national policy. A village's fate, tax levels, labor burdens, even relocation, could be decided based on a single interpretation of chord and knot. And the system worked, most of the time. Your guide pulls you aside and shows you a curious quipu, similar in design, but with strange knots and alternating colors you haven't seen used this way before. This, he says, is a political message. A private one. You realize, this quipu isn't for accounting. It's for influence. Some quipus, he explains, weren't widely shared. They were tools of the noble class, encoded with meanings only a few could interpret. They might carry reports on loyalty, dissent, or personal favors. It's the Inca version of encrypted emails, except made of alpaca hair and better design choices. Fun fact, there are theories, still debated, that quipus were sometimes used as legal documents or contracts. Some even contained small tokens or fringe knots meant to indicate signatures. Without written language, this was the next best thing. Some of these quipus still exist, stored in caves or buried under fallen administrative centers, their meanings locked behind a lost oral key. You're shown one last piece, a quipu rumored to contain the census of the empire just before the Spanish arrived. Hundreds of chords. Thousands of knots. It is, in effect, a national snapshot, a woven database of people, animals, crops, labor, and tribute. Its complexity humbles you. And here's the curveball, it's not perfect. The guide points to a section with corrections, extra chords added later, possibly in haste. This was changed, he says. We don't know why. Some say there was rebellion. Others, a miscount. Maybe the truth was inconvenient. That's the shadow side of the system. Quipus were only as honest as the hands that tied them. While most quipu kamayak were fiercely accurate, power always finds a way to wiggle into the data. After all, it's easy to twist a narrative when it's literally made of string. Still, the system endured. For centuries, it kept the empire coordinated, equitable, for the most part, and astonishingly functional. Until the arrival of the Spanish. You'll get to that part soon enough. But for now, you leave the royal archives humbled. Not by the complexity, though it is immense, but by the realization that a civilization could live, thrive, and govern, all without written words. In a world obsessed with speaking, the Incas built an empire that listened to knots. And tomorrow, you'll step into the realm of art, because some quipus were never meant to be read, only remembered. By now, you've seen quipus used to count, to coordinate, even to command. But today, you're venturing into something different. You're not heading to a granary, a school, or a palace. You're heading to a quiet adobe home at the edge of the city, where the walls are covered not with paintings or portraits, but with quipus. Dozens of them. And not a single one makes numerical sense. The woman who lives here is a weaver, known throughout the region not just for her cloth, but for her story quipu. You step inside, and it's like entering the dream of a mathematician who fell asleep during an art exhibit. Chords of all colors, thicknesses, and materials. Some hang straight. Others twist into spirals. A few are bundled like sunbursts. These, she says, are memories. She hands you one, soft blue with tiny feathers interwoven between every fifth knot. This is my son, she explains. Born under the hummingbird moon. She gestures to a loop tied near the top. He came early. You ask if it's for census. She smiles. No. It's for me. You're not sure what to call it. Memoir? Monument? Museum piece? It's personal history, told in thread. These quipus don't follow the rigid patterns you've seen in administrative archives. They bend rules. Invent new ones. Use beads, shells, tufts of wool, even strands of hair. And while some scholars might dismiss these as a non-official, it's clear they were part of a living, breathing culture that valued expression as much as precision. Fun fact, some of the most elaborately made quipus were buried with people. Grave goods. Offerings. Or maybe confessions. We've found quipus in tombs that defy classification, no known numerical sequence, no clear administrative function. Just beauty, intention, and mystery. Historians are torn. Some insist these are purely ceremonial, symbolic, not meant to be read. Others believe they carry deep autobiographical meaning, encoded in a logic we've simply forgotten. One theory posits that these quipus were mnemonic prompts for oral storytelling, each knot triggering a scene, a feeling, a life event. Like a diary without sentences. The woman shows you another, dark, walls, you tie a single knot in a blank cord. Not a message. Not even a word. Just presence. A marker in time. You tuck it into a crack in the wall and step back. It feels like planting something. Tomorrow, you'll descend into a lost temple, where the last complete quipu was hidden for centuries, waiting for someone to listen. You wake early, the sky just beginning to blush. Today, you're descending, not into metaphorical insight, but into stone and shadow. Your destination is a long-abandoned temple on the edge of the sacred valley, one spoken of only in murmurs, a place where, it said, a complete quipu was hidden and left untouched, for centuries. The path winds down into a crevice between cliffs, overgrown with moss and the hum of insects that clearly haven't had visitors in a while. Your guide is quiet, reverent. This isn't tourist territory. This is memory made sacred. You reach the mouth of the temple. It's small, no grand staircases or golden doors. Just a rough-cut entrance flanked by worn carvings of stars and rivers. Inside, it's cool, damp, and lit only by the flickering light of a torch. The walls are etched with spirals, animal shapes, and faint grooves that might once have guided water. At the end of a narrow corridor, you find it, hanging behind a thin veil of spider webs and time, a quipu unlike any you've seen. It's enormous. Not in length, but in density. Dozens of cords, layered and branched like the roots of a banyan tree. Each cord is multicolored, dyed in faded but still distinct hues. Knots vary wildly, tight spirals, lazy loops, angular turns that seem almost intentional in their asymmetry. Beads and feathers interwoven not for decoration, but for narrative punctuation. And it's untouched. Not just preserved physically, but spiritually. It's never been catalogued by a museum. Never photographed. Never filtered through colonial assumptions or archaeological papers. It is, simply, itself. Your guide steps aside. This was left during the fall, she whispers. To record the end. Or maybe a beginning. You kneel before it, not out of obligation, but instinct. This isn't just data. It's testimony. You study it carefully. Some sections are immediately recognizable, tribute records, agricultural logs, ceremonial dates. But others defy every structure you've learned. One section repeats a knot sequence 3 times, each with a different color pairing. Another forms a deliberate curve. You realize this is narrative. You're looking at a story. Not a ledger. Not a report. A full account of a community. Their days, their rituals, their losses. A chord for a child's birth. A knot for the first rain. A loop for a festival never completed. You feel it, not in your brain, but in your chest. This is someone's voice, without sound. Fun fact, while most scholars agree that quipus were used primarily for numerical information, a growing body of research suggests that some may have functioned as narrative tools. Not writing in the traditional sense, but a hybrid system, mnemonic, symbolic, oral. And here you are, face to face with one of those elusive specimens. You reach into your bag and pull out your own travel quipu, the one you've been adding to. Slowly, deliberately, you tie a new cord to it. Just one. Deep purple. A single loose knot. It means nothing by itself, but it anchors this moment. Your guide watches you work and smiles. Many came to study it, she says. But few tried to answer. You ask what she means. She points to the final pendant cord of the temple quipu. It's short. Undyed. No knots. Just an end. Or maybe an invitation. You tie your cord to it. Not to translate. Not to solve. But to respond. As you exit the temple, light filters down the corridor in a perfect golden beam. You step into it like crossing a threshold, not just out of the temple, but out of a time when the past felt distant. Now it feels woven into you. Tomorrow, you'll return to the present, to the modern researchers trying to resurrect this language with lasers, algorithms, and a healthy amount of guesswork. You're back in the world of noise, car horns, blinking screens, the whir of air conditioning. But part of you still thinks in knots. Still hears in chords. Still sees in patterns. You've returned to the present day, and today, you are stepping into a university lab where the quipu is no longer sacred, it's scanned. The lab is sleek, clinical. Computers hum like caffeinated bees. You're greeted by a researcher with a coffee-stained shirt and the posture of someone who hasn't stretched since the Clinton administration. She waves you over to a workstation where an ancient quipu, delicate, brittle, protected under glass, is being scanned by a laser system that looks like it was borrowed from NASA. This, she says, is how we read memory now. The team here is part of a growing movement to digitize and decode every surviving quipu on the planet. They photograph, scan, and model each knot in 3D, cataloging it by size, position, material, twist direction, and color. It's the world's most complicated game of yarn-based Sudoku. One researcher shows you a computer model of a quipu rotating in virtual space. Each knot is tagged with metadata, distance from the top cord, direction of spin, knot type. On screen, it's less like a necklace and more like a galaxy, each star a data point, waiting to be connected. They've built algorithms to identify patterns, repetitions, anomalies, nested relationships. One cord from a quipu found near Lima shows a knot sequence identical to one discovered hundreds of miles away near Lake Titicaca. Coincidence? Or standardization? The debate rages in footnotes and conference panels. Fun fact, some researchers believe that the position of a knot's twist, S or Z, might function like grammatical markers. Others think that combinations of knot types, in specific groupings, could represent syllables or ideas. The lab walls are covered in sticky notes with theories like green equals maize, or feathers equals ceremony, or just flair. You watch a demonstration of a new AI tool. It's fed dozens of scanned quipus and begins highlighting possible phrases, sequences that repeat across quipus with different contexts. One string is flagged as possibly meaning tribute paid. Another might be season of planting. A third is still labeled. You ask the head researcher what she thinks the quipu really was. She doesn't hesitate. A system. Not a language. Not a calculator. A system that adapted to need. And because it wasn't fixed, because it could mean many things, it survived. She points to a modern quipu hanging on the wall, made by an artist in Chile last year. It tracks rainfall, crop cycles, and community birthdays. It's both art and function. A nod to the past and a tool for now. You realize, the quipu isn't dead. It's evolving. You meet a student researcher who's part Quechua. She tells you about her grandmother, who still ties small cords during holidays, not for accounting, but to mark the day. She shows you one from last year, red with a green feather. For the pepper harvest and my cousin's wedding, she explains. You ask if she can read the ancient quipus. She shakes her head. Not yet. But I feel them. And maybe that's the key. The lab's latest project involves augmented reality. They're developing an app that allows you to hold your phone over a digital quipu and watch it come alive, data visualized in animations. It's part educational tool, part resurrection. The goal? Make quipus readable again. Not just for scholars. For everyone. But they're still missing something, context. No matter how good the tech gets, it can't replicate the original minds that tied these cords. It can model knots, not intention. It can visualize structure, but not story. For that, you need humans. Memory. Culture. Before you leave, the researcher gives you a copy of a scanned quipu, printed flat on paper. Take it, she says. See what it tells you. You look at the lines, the shapes, the silent geometry. And tomorrow, you'll return to the past once more, this time, to deliver a quipu of your own, and close the loop you began in the mountains. The journey back to the highlands feels like rewinding a song you didn't realize you'd memorized. You take the same paths, see the same cliffs, breathe the same thin, sharp air, but you're not the same person. You've scanned quipus, argued theories with researchers, and now you're holding your own final creation. A quipu. Yours. 10 chords, each one a chapter of your experience. Colors chosen deliberately. Knots tied with steady fingers. Feathers, beads, and one chord left blank, open-ended, like all good stories. You return to the same village that welcomed you with wary glances weeks ago. This time, they nod as you pass. Someone hands you a cup of chicha. Another adjusts the llama that's blocking your path with regal disinterest. You're led to the central hall, where the village Quipucamayak, your first teacher, waits. The others gather quietly, respectfully. You're not just a visitor now. You're a contributor. You stand in front of the ceremonial peg, the place where messages and records are hung, and you raise your quipu. There's a quiet murmur, approval, curiosity, maybe a bit of let's hope they got it right this time. You begin to speak. Not with your voice. With the knots. You walk through each chord, narrating its meaning. Yellow, your arrival, and the moment you realized silence can be loud. Brown, the first potato inventory, where you learn decimal knots and humility. Red, the festival you started by mistake. Blue, your first successfully delivered message. Gold and black, the temple quipu, and the knot you added to the end of the unknown. One by one, the village elders nod. The youngest Quipucamayak ties a simple confirming knot at the bottom of your primary chord, a way of saying, we received it. We remember. This is it. You've delivered a quipu. Not as a courier, but as a participant in a tradition older than most alphabets. Then comes the unexpected, your quipu is accepted into the village archive. It's not stored away in a box or placed on a shelf. It's added to the wall alongside theirs, hung with care, spaced just right. You've added your voice to their collective memory. Not carved in stone, but tied in thread. Fun fact, in some parts of the Andes, families kept personal quipus for generations. Births, deaths, trades, migrations, all recorded not for bureaucratic tracking, but for legacy. These cords became heirlooms. And now, yours joins that lineage, not of blood, but of purpose. One elder gives you a new cord in return. Just one, green, with a single, tight knot near the top. It means you returned, he says. You tie it to your travel quipu. Quietly. Gratefully. As the ceremony ends, people drift back to their routines. You stay for a moment, staring at your quipu on the wall. It looks ordinary among the others. Faded even. But you know what it means. You know what it took to tie each knot. And you realize, this was never about decoding the past. It was about joining it. Tomorrow, you'll say goodbye and take one last walk under the stars that once guided every knot. Your final evening in the Andes arrives quietly, like the hush before a page turns. There's no farewell parade, no grand ceremony. Just the same mountains that have watched you from the beginning, the same wind that once felt foreign and now feels like a lullaby. You've got one last walk to take, alone, under the stars. You follow a narrow path past the fields, through terraces sculpted like stairways to history. The village behind you glows softly with torchlight, and in your pocket, your quipu rests like a second pulse. One of the cords brushes your fingertips with each step, as if reminding you, you belong to this now. Above, the sky is as clear as you've ever seen it. The Milky Way cuts across it like a cosmic quipu, each star a knot in the universe's own record. You remember what the elder astronomer told you days ago, when the sun isn't speaking, the stars do. You sit on a flat rock and pull out your travel quipu. One by one, you trace each cord. You remember the awkwardness of your first inventory, the thrill of your first message, the chaos of your mistaken festival. You really did almost cause an inter-village wedding, and the silence of the temple where you left a knot beside a mystery. Every knot is still there. Some looser now, some tighter, aged by the journey like wrinkles on a well-lived face. Suddenly, you realize you're not alone. A child from the village, no older than 10, appears beside you. She doesn't say anything. Just sits. After a moment, she pulls out a tiny quipu of her own. For cords. All soft pastels. Likely her first. She offers it to you to examine. You read it slowly, carefully. One cord has a single knot. Arrival. The second has 3 tiny ones. Family. The third is unknotted but twisted, play, perhaps. The fourth has a shell at the end. A wish. You hand it back, and she beams. Then, in a quiet voice, she says, "You forgot to tie your goodbye." You smile. Of course. You take out a short, deep blue cord and tie it to your own quipu. One knot. Then another, looser, below it. No beads. No feathers. Just memory. Just presence. Just a pause that says, "This mattered." You hand her a spare blank cord in return. For your next wish, you whisper. And she runs off, barefoot and quiet as moonlight. Back in the village, the elders are waiting to share one last cup of chicha with you. It's a quiet gathering. No speeches. Just sips, nods, and the occasional soft laugh when someone mimics your exhausted runner face from that first week. Someone even brought back the llama from the festival. Still judgmental. Still fabulous. One of the elders hands you a woven pouch. Inside are snippets of old quipus, retired cords, faded with time, their data long past. For your journey, he says. Not as tools. As reminders. You nod. You don't need to say anything. Tomorrow, you'll leave. The road will win back to cities, screens, and voices that speak too fast. But the quiet will stay with you. In your fingers. In your memory. In the knots you tied, and the ones you still might. Because the truth is, not everything needs words. And some stories are best told in silence, one knot at a time. The morning of your departure comes with no fanfare. Just dew on the grass, a rooster with questionable timing, and your travel pack resting quietly beside the door. The village is stirring slowly, as if even time itself is reluctant to see you off. You walk once more through the central square. Children run by with slings and smiles. A woman nods to you while hanging drying herbs. You pass the wall of quipus, your quipu still hangs there, the final cord you tied last night swaying slightly in the breeze like it, too, is waving goodbye. At the edge of the village, a small group waits to escort you to the first bend in the road. The elder Kipukamayak is among them, carrying a pouch wrapped in a textile patterned with jaguars and condors. He hands it to you gently. Inside, you find a new quipu. It's not one you tied. It's one they made. For you. Each cord is labeled with a small, hand-woven tab. One reads, First Message. Another, Starlight. Another, Accidental Wedding. Each knot is deliberate. Each cord a shared moment. It's a record not of what you did, but how you were remembered. You try to speak, but the words don't land. The elder places a hand on your shoulder and says simply, We speak in knots. You listened. And you did. You take one last look at the village, the terraces carved like fingerprints into the mountainside, the stone houses that outlast storms, the threads that outlast time. Then, you turn toward the road. One foot in front of the other. Step by step. Chord by chord. No fanfare. Just the knowledge that you came here with questions, and you're leaving with memory. Along the path, you meet a traveler going the other way, a young woman with a curious look and a blank cord tucked into her belt. She asks you if the stories about the knots are true. You smile and hand her a small piece of your own quipu. Just a snippet. A start. You'll see, you say. Just listen. And then, with the sun rising behind you, you walk on. Because the story never really ends. It just waits to be tied again. And now, let's ease back from the high cliffs and quiet hallways of the Inca Empire. Let your breathing slow. Let the buzz of modern life soften, just for a little while. Picture yourself once more in the highlands, cool air brushing your skin, the scent of earth and woven wool in the breeze. The mountains rise around you, ancient and still, like time pressing pause. Somewhere, a llama makes a disapproving noise. Classic. You sit beside a stone wall. A simple one. Maybe it's a terrace. Maybe it's just a place to rest. In your hands is a single cord. No knots yet. Just potential. You roll it between your fingers. You think about the messages you've carried today, and not with words, but with presence. With memory. With care. The sky begins to shift. The sun sets slowly behind the peaks, casting golden lines like drawn threads across the horizon. Above you, the first stars blink into view, one by one, as if the universe is tying its own quipu above your head. You feel safe. Not because nothing will go wrong, but because you've seen how even the most tangled cords can be read, understood, cherished. You are not lost. You are recorded. A soft wind moves past, lifting the edges of your blanket, brushing your skin like the hands of time itself. And in that wind, maybe, just maybe, you feel the gentle tug of a cord tied long ago. A reminder that memory, once held, never fully unravels. So breathe. Let go of the day. Let the knots loosen. Let your thoughts drift like soft thread. You've walked with history. You've listened to silence. Now, it's time to sleep.